Our grifters really are better than their grifters. See, on the right, our grifters will now and then come up with some hokum, some goofy, scary, silliness, like becoming magnetized or something like that by the COVID vaccine. That's the least of your worries now. The 5G thing and all that, it's not as big of a deal compared to what we now have some understanding that the COVID vaccine could do to you. Now that we have some understanding of it. The facts, the raw and cut facts being far worse than anything we could imagine. So, something that I was thinking about is crazy Black history. If only this were like a skit at one time, like a Key and Peele. I've only caught a few of their things over the years. I know. It's like, dude, seriously? And it's like, once I stopped watching movies, I started to fade from that. Once I was no longer watching episodic television, it just became YouTube, and normal people are absolutely fascinating. So there was recently this thing about crazy black history, where it was that there were, quote unquote, it was black people in London in the 1300s during the plague because of these bodies that were found. Now, there was a whole number of things I started to think about. Okay, just from what, like, if you were to give this a solid debunking, like, what would be some good logical stuff? But it's just that, like, where did they get? So, I had, at one point, finally, whenever I think about a debunking, I'm like, wait a second. So, but where did they get this idea? And then you find out, oh, they found the bodies, they did facial reconstruction kind of stuff, and they ended up figuring out these people kind of looked blackish, or something like that, according to whoever was looking at these faces. Or the what these people thought the faces, the reconstruction they would look like. Which is very, very interesting in a way, because if you know about the history of racism, you would know that there is like this history of, are the Irish just sort of these, like, are the blacks and the Irish evidence? There's various groups. Why would they show almost every group that's non-white during, like, say, the Woodrow Wilson era or the Teddy Roosevelt era in papers as primates? And it's because there's all these people that they looked more like primates. And a lot of people don't get, when you have a lot of people that they're kind of the sort of lowest tiers of the genetics, like they're of the poorest kind of, they're those people. They're not from coastal metropolitan cities of that land, let's just say. They are not a mix of a lot of genes in any way. They are absolutely their people. Because this was spoken about quite specifically about the Irish. And you could find early American pictures of the Irish being compared to blacks and both being compared to primates. And this is because of this idea that there was some kind of lower racial grouping, that the people's, this is where you then get especially a lot of the ideas of the North Pole Society. People that humans actually came from the northernmost reaches of the world, and as they spread from there, they sort of became more and more like apes. Loosely, that kind of racial mystical collectivism. Well, so this idea of black people being in London during the plague. So a number of you, I'm thinking, have already, you know enough about Britain, or you know enough about the plague, or you know enough about sea travel. Put in the comments how this should almost immediately hit people as hokum. Like almost anyone should be able to be like, that's not very likely, because of. But the thing that I think becomes the big question, why would they be there? Why would you go to London of all places? And I'm betting there's a bunch of you that you're like, yeah, that's pretty much what my objection was. That's my debunking right there. Why would you have gone there? What could possibly have been the purpose of all the places that people could have gone, where there would have been an entirely different method of mitigating the plague? The weather would have been more tropical. There's also the misunderstanding about why the plague spread the way it did. This obviously is a misunderstanding of things. Like a severe misunderstanding of that era of time. But this is crazy black history. And it's like, because of course somebody would say, well, why didn't they just go to Spain? That wouldn't have even made sense. Why would they have been in Britain? And then this idea of, they enslaved them and brought them to Britain. And then it's like, who? And how'd they get them there? There's a whole bunch of these kind of things. Do you understand how expensive that would have been? To get people from that continent to that continent at that time would have been extremely expensive. Extremely, what were these people doing? Where did you find their bodies? Because they would have been probably they would have, by their association with whoever brought them there. And if they were saying there's some 30 some bodies, if I remember right. And that many bodies that's not a small number in those days. The Jewish population of Europe, of the intercontinental Europe, was whittled down to less than 1,000 people by the Black Plague. So finding 30-something bodies from some part of Africa somewhere in Britain, that would be extremely significant. So, of course, there's all this stuff that starts to stack up being I don't know. This is starting to sound like crazy black history. Now, somebody who's not familiar with this, somebody who's younger, or they've maybe heard some theories that, black people did that, or Africans did that, something like this. They don't realize a lot of people who have had the quote-unquote black American experience quite specifically. You do not seem to encounter this with black Brazilians, with people from Belize. You don't encounter this with almost any other group. It seems to be something that is a black American phenomenon. I've traced it back to Noble Drew Ali, and the 5% Nation, and a lot of those kind of mystical collectivist groups. More Science Temple, Marcus Garvey and his movement, because you see this also to some degree in Jamaica, but Jamaica, they sort of, you'll hear this from Jamaicans, but it's just not, it's not as strong. When you meet people who really think this stuff, they're you can't sway them. It is totally bonkotasm, and their whole world has been constructed by bonkotasm. And the ancient mystical power of the bonko drum inventing the word Om or something. Because So leave it in the comments all the many reasons why logistically a bunch of people from Africa being in Britain during the Black Plague it just doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. But if people who are unfamiliar with this don't understand that there's these enclaves of Black Americans that they do this constantly for every single thing in history. They come up with how it was actually them. And what's really fascinating about it is when you hear these guys talk about it, they never name a group of people from some part of Africa. They just say black people. And it's because this is so steeped in racial mystical collectivism. Like the Klan kind of thinking. Like white Israelitism, that kind of stuff. They're so into this. And, and you find this with Islam as well, because Islam mixes the idea of it being a religion, an ideology, a political philosophy, an economic philosophy, and kind of a transracial group. So this mystical collectivism. So you can invent the sun, moon, and stars according to your own mystical collectivist, doctrine. And so it actually gets, you got a bus. Why don't you, there we go. And so that's one of those, that had come up, and I was starting to think about it. I'm like, okay, and now you get, most likely when you meet such kinds of people who are mystical race collectivists, they tend to be socialists because the two go together very well. You found this with the Third Reich, and so this is why fascism doesn't work along those kind of lines. That National Socialism has this weird thing of it being really tied up in mystical racial collectivism. To the point that, that Mussolini had to comment on that about his meetings with Hitler, is that Mussolini couldn't understand why Adolf Hitler was so hung up on people's ethnic backgrounds. And he didn't see how the guy's movement could survive such an ideology. And so it's now this thing of like, you see, so everybody who wants to kind of throw the word fascist around, it's because they don't want to face how normal it is, how normal polylogism is among aired thinking and the aired thinking of the left. That it's just whole groups. We're going to come up with a name for a group, and that whole group does certain things. So a lot of Black Americans have this kind of wacky idea that it's like whole groups do that. And it's like, because black people did that. So it's never some group of people from Africa. Now, I've been watching all these guys who've been doing fantastic work all over YouTube of actual African historical events. And, and how certain regions changed and all this stuff. And it's really interesting stuff. It's hard, because it's the history of one of the largest continent, the largest, actually. No, next to, this is a country of Russia. So that socialists, in trying to collectivize people, then have to reinvent history. They have to retell it, and it's wrong. Typically, they typically are skipping over nuance, skipping over whole sets of events. They want to pick a winner and a loser all the time. There always has to be a winner and a loser. All stories in history have to have a winner and a loser to socialists. So that's why they dement so much of people's histories. And then if you don't agree with them about your own history, they accuse you of being some kind of race traitor or something like that, which people have experienced a lot with the present white American left and British white left, that guy Owen Jones is one of those kinds of people that he accuses you of like kind of going along with white supremacy. And it's like, no, Owen, you don't know what you're talking about. How about that? How about you go suck the shit off your boyfriend's cock, buddy. You don't know what you're talking about the history of my fucking people, buddy. tell it to Marx next time you see him. I'll help you. You know, it's like, so it's just, I've been loving how this is now totally falling apart on the left, because now more and more there, especially like you're catching it with really normal black Americans that are like, no, that it didn't happen like that. What are you talking about? You know, and that now it's, and all over YouTube you're seeing this, that the leftists are having a real hard time dealing with normal black Americans being like, no, that's not how that happened. Where are these people getting this from? You know, and it's, yeah, and it's because socialists have to make shit up out of whole cloth, because there's those kind of people. They're weaklings, and they don't like doing the hard work. They don't like doing the heavy lifting of the real research. And at some point, they're not self-effacing. Maybe because I'm, you know, too lazy or too unskilled to make it and make a lot of money in the market economy. Instead of doing that, which is fine. Like, if you don't make a lot of money in the market economy, that's pretty normal. But they've done something to their own mind that they have to be the Superman, and there we go. There we are with the Nietzsche thing. That's where they dement the idea of the Superman. There we are. That's what it was. So yeah, for Bright Flame, I think, that's what it was. Is, to me, they dement the idea of the Superman. And you were saying that. I had to walk through it. It took weeks, buddy. See, you're still in there. You're still in my head. I was still thinking about that, you know. There's a lot of comments. I'm like, I don't know if I ever made a video about that. Let me check the titles. Well, that didn't help. The title of this video is Goo Goo Gaga, you know. My most important video. I broke down the essence of everything. The great speech, Goo Goo Gaga. There was then, I was thinking about the socialist thing, of how they have to dement reality so that it fits in, because at some point they even have to dement the metrics. Like now, employment, joblessness, how the economy is doing, the collective, that end of coercive collectivist thinkers in the Democratic Party have completely demented the metrics. Dealing with all kinds of issues recently of biology, with the transgenderism, demented fundamental epistemology of the field, that the philosophy, that the fundamental logos of the field is being twisted, and that we, by a lot of fundamental biological terms, have to be thrown out the window for something that is not actually based on experimental science, and never was based on any kind of actual observational, you know, or experimental scientific research. There's just some psychologists who say maybe some drugs will help. You're so fucked up. Maybe just a battery of drugs will help. I think that's also a part of it, is that because people must have noticed how there's this tendency with some of the crazier trans videos, that there's like something extra special about them. They're the most demented Superman, and that they have to feel that the world has cheated them because they're trans, and the world won't accept them. The world is cheating them. You know, it's like the lamest Kylo Ren. You know, like, yeah, the lamest Kylo Ren that could ever possibly exist. So, yeah, just, I think I'll keep it there for now, because, yeah, there we go. That's what I was rolling through my head as I was taking off this morning. All right, peace.